Welcome, wanderers, to another journey through the mist. Tonight, the Foggy Bard brings you three chilling tales from the shadows, stories that will linger long after the lights go out. Are you ready to step into the unknown? Our first tale begins with an innocent antique mirror, but as you'll soon discover, some reflections hold more than just our image. The mirror that knows too much. It started as an impulse purchase at an antique shop. The mirror was beautiful, ornate gold framing, delicate carvings of ivy leaves running along its edges, and a smooth, spotless surface. It looked like it belonged in a grand mansion rather than the dusty corner of a second-hand store. I didn't think much of it when I brought it home. It hung perfectly on the wall of my bedroom, catching the morning light in ways that made the room feel brighter, warmer. But as the days passed, I started noticing things, small things at first. My reflection sometimes lingered a second longer than it should have when I turned away. Or I'd catch what looked like a shadow moving across the surface when no one else was there. I chalked it up to my imagination. Lack of sleep, maybe. But then the mirror started showing me things I wasn't doing. I remember the first time it happened vividly. I was brushing my hair before bed, but in the mirror my reflection wasn't holding a brush. It was holding a pair of scissors, and it was smiling. My heart froze. I turned around to look behind me, expecting to see someone standing there, but the room was empty. When I turned back to the mirror, my reflection was normal again. Just me, standing there, pale and terrified. Over the next few nights, the visions grew worse. I saw my reflection crying, screaming silently as if begging me to help. I saw it holding objects I didn't own, an old rusted knife, a bloodied handkerchief, and always there was that smile, wide, too wide, stretching unnaturally across its face. One night, I woke up to a sound like whispering. It was faint, almost too quiet to hear, but it was coming from the mirror. The surface seemed darker than usual, like the glass was no longer reflecting light but absorbing it. "Help us," a voice whispered, barely audible. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. The next morning, I decided to get rid of it. I took the mirror off the wall and dragged it to the garage. But even there, I couldn't escape it. I'd hear whispers every time I walked past the garage door. Sometimes I'd find the door slightly ajar, even though I knew I had closed it. The final straw came a week later. I walked into my bedroom and found the mirror back on the wall exactly where it had been before. My reflection was standing there, smiling, holding the same scissors I'd seen it with on that first night. But this time, it wasn't just an image. It raised its arm, and I felt a sharp pain in my own hand. When I looked down, I was holding the scissors. I screamed and threw the mirror to the floor. The glass shattered, but instead of shards, it released a thick, black mist that quickly filled the room. I stumbled out, gasping for air, and slammed the door shut behind me. I don't know what I unleashed that night. I've since moved, far away from that house, but sometimes I still see shadows moving in the corners of my eye. And every now and then, when I glance at a mirror, I see it, my reflection, smiling that same, unnatural smile. The shadows never truly leave us, do they? But don't look away yet. The next story takes us deeper into the darkness. What would you do if the whispers you heard weren't just in your head? Our next tale, The Whispering Shadows, begins now. The Whispering Shadows. It began on a quiet night, the kind where silence seems louder than sound. I was sitting in my living room, reading a book, when I first heard it, a faint whisper. At first, I thought it was the wind slipping through the cracks in my old house. But as the whispers continued, it became clear that they weren't random. They were words, soft and deliberate, spoken just out of reach. "Come closer." The voice was so faint I thought I'd imagined it. I brushed it off and returned to my book, but the feeling lingered, a prickling sensation at the back of my neck, like I was being watched. Over the next few nights, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. They seemed to come from the corners of my house, the places where the light didn't quite reach. And they weren't alone. Shadows started to move, just at the edge of my vision. At first, I thought it was my mind playing tricks on me. I hadn't been sleeping well, and maybe my imagination was filling in the gaps. But when I turned on the lights, the shadows didn't vanish. They lingered, shifting slightly, as though waiting for me to look away. The turning point came one night when I woke up at 3 a.m. My room was completely dark except for a faint glow coming from the corner. I froze. The glow wasn't from any light source I recognized. It was alive, pulsating like a slow heartbeat. And then I saw it. A shadow, darker than the rest of the room, standing just beyond the glow. It didn't move, but I felt its gaze, cold, calculating, and far too intelligent. "Why do you resist?" The whisper was louder this time, almost a growl. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to run, but my body wouldn't move. My heart was racing, my breath caught in my throat. The shadow seemed to sense my fear because it laughed, a low, guttural sound that echoed in my ears long after it stopped. The next day, I tried to rationalize what I'd seen. Maybe I was sleep deprived, I told myself. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the answer. I decided to set up a camera in my bedroom, hoping to catch something, anything, that would prove I wasn't losing my mind. When I reviewed the footage the next morning, my blood ran cold. The video showed me sleeping soundly, but at exactly 3 a.m., the shadows in the room began to shift. They pooled together in the corner, forming a shape that was eerily human. And then they turned to face the camera. I could barely watch as the shadow moved closer to my bed, its hand, if you could call it that, hovering inches above my face. For a moment, it paused, then slowly turned its head toward the camera. Its eyes, or the spaces where eyes should have been, glowed faintly before the screen went black. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed up with every light in the house turned on, clutching a flashlight like it was a weapon. But the shadows didn't care about the light. They came anyway, creeping along the walls, their whispers louder and angrier than ever. "You can't escape us." By the fourth night, I was desperate. I called a friend, explaining the situation as best I could without sounding completely insane. They agreed to come over, but when they arrived, the whispers stopped. The shadows disappeared. My friend looked around, shrugged, and said, "You probably just need some rest." But the moment they left, the house plunged into darkness. The shadows were back, and they weren't hiding anymore. They moved freely now, crawling across the floor, climbing the walls. One of them stood at the foot of my bed, whispering words I couldn't understand. That was when I realized the truth. The shadows weren't trying to scare me, they were trying to take me. I don't remember much about that night, only that I woke up on the floor, surrounded by darkness. The house was empty, but it didn't feel empty. The shadows were gone, but their presence lingered, heavy and suffocating. I moved out the next day, leaving everything behind. I didn't care about the cost. I just wanted to escape. But sometimes, when I close my eyes at night, I still hear them. Whispers in the dark, calling me back. The shadows are patient, but not all dangers hide in the dark. Our next tale takes us to a place where curiosity leads to the forbidden, a door that was never meant to be opened. Stay with us for The Locked Door I Was Told Never to Open. If the whispers gave you chills, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to The Foggy Bard for more unsettling tales. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever heard whispers in the dark? And stay tuned, because the next story will leave you questioning what lies behind closed doors. The locked door I was told never to open. When I moved into the old house, the landlord had one simple instruction: don't open the door at the end of the hallway. It sounded strange, but I didn't think much of it at the time. The house was charming in its own way, with creaky wooden floors and antique fixtures that told stories of a bygone era. The mysterious door at the end of the hall seemed to fit right in with the house's character. For weeks, I ignored it. I had no reason to go near it. But as time passed, curiosity gnawed at me. What was behind it? A storage room? An unfinished space? It was locked, and the landlord hadn't offered me a key. One night, as I was heading to bed, I passed by the door and noticed something strange. The faint sound of scratching. I stopped, listening intently. It wasn't loud, but it was distinct, as if something, or someone, was on the other side trying to claw its way out. My first thought was rodents, but the sound was too deliberate, too rhythmic. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. The scratching became a nightly occurrence. It didn't seem to follow any pattern. It would start and stop at random intervals. I told myself it was nothing, probably just the house settling. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the door was watching me. Things escalated a week later. I woke up in the middle of the night to a loud bang. I jumped out of bed, heart racing, and followed the noise to the hallway. The locked door was rattling violently, as though something on the other side was trying to break through. My breath caught in my throat. The doorknob twisted and shook, but the door didn't open. And then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. Silence. The next morning, I called the landlord. "What's behind the door?" I demanded, my voice trembling. There was a long pause before he answered. "It's nothing you need to worry about. Just don't open it. I mean it." His evasiveness only fueled my curiosity. That night, I stood in front of the door, flashlight in hand. I pressed my ear against the wood, straining to hear anything. At first, there was nothing but silence. Then, faintly, I heard it. A whisper. "Help me." The voice was soft, almost childlike. I stepped back, my pulse pounding in my ears. Was someone trapped in there? Against my better judgment, I made a decision. I was going to open the door. The lock was old and rusted, and it didn't take much effort to pry it open with a screwdriver. As the door creaked ajar, a cold, musty smell wafted out, sending shivers down my spine. I hesitated, but then pushed it open fully. The room was pitch black. My flashlight revealed a small, empty space. No furniture, no windows, just cracked walls and a dirt-covered floor. But then I saw them. Scratch marks, long and deep, etched into the wood near the base of the door. My heart sank. They weren't made by an animal. They were human. And then the door slammed shut behind me. I spun around, fumbling for the handle, but it wouldn't budge. The whispers began again, louder this time, overlapping and echoing in the darkness. My flashlight flickered, and for a moment, I thought I saw movement. A figure, tall and twisted, its eyes glowing faintly in the beam of light. "Why did you open the door?" the voice hissed, no longer soft or childlike. It was guttural, filled with malice. I screamed, banging on the door, pleading for it to open. The air grew colder, and I felt something brush against my arm, something cold and bony. My flashlight went out completely, plunging me into total darkness. The whispers grew into a deafening roar. When the door finally opened, I stumbled out into the hallway, gasping for air. The house was silent again, as if nothing had happened, but I knew better. I could feel it, a presence, watching me, waiting. I moved out the next day, leaving everything behind. But even now, I can't escape it. Sometimes when I'm alone, I hear whispers. And when I pass by closed doors, I feel an overwhelming urge to open them, no matter how much I try to resist. Curiosity can be a dangerous thing, especially when it leads us to places we were warned to avoid. What lies behind locked doors isn't always meant to be uncovered. The stories presented in this video are works of fiction intended solely for entertainment. Any similarities to real events, places, or people are purely coincidental. Viewer discretion is advised, as these tales may contain content unsettling to some audiences.